नमस्कार एंड वेलकम टू RCI नवशिखर चैनल। RCI के नवशिखर चैनल में हमारे सभी दर्शकों का स्वागत है। आज के हमारे प्रोग्राम का टॉपिक है PWD एक्ट एंड द फैसिलिटीज एंड कंसेशंस अवेलेबल फॉर द पर्सन्स विद विजुअल इम्पेयरमेंट। एंड टुडे वी हैव विद अस डॉक्टर अनिल. He is the associate professor in English at the School of Open Learning, University of Delhi, and is also the vice president of the All India Confederation of Blind. And he has been working in the field of disability, especially for the visually impaired persons, for the past 15 years at the national and at the international level. Welcome to RCI Navshikar channel, sir.
Thank you very much indeed.
And thank you so much, sir, for coming over here.
It's a pleasure for me.
And progressing further, I would like to inform our viewers that they can call us for their any queries. हमारा टोल फ्री नंबर है 1800112008. हमारा स्टूडियो नंबर है 26511613 और हमारा फैक्स नंबर है 26511609. Moving further, I would like to add a quote here. In the words of Helen Keller, deafness separates the person from things, but blindness separates the person from person. And today, to inculcate the visually impaired person, the blind person, into the realm, into the reality, we'll be discussing about what are the different concessions, facilities and schemes available for them in various spheres of life. So let's ask sir, आज आप हमें क्या बताने जाएंगे?
Thank you, Kriti. First of all, I would like to extend my gratitude to the RCI for inviting me for this very important program. I also would like to thank all the viewers for tuning in to see the program on this very important topic. देखिए, जब हम कंसेशंस की बात करते हैं और PW एक्ट की बात करते हैं स्पेसिफिकली फॉर पर्सन्स विद विजुअल इम्पेयरमेंट, it is a very vast kind of topic and it can be perhaps seen in two parts. One, the actual facts, concessions क्या हैं और किस किस स्फीयर में हैं, किस किस एरिया ऑफ लाइफ को इम्पैक्ट करते हैं, और दूसरा है द फिलोसफिकल पार्ट ऑफ द एक्ट एंड द कंसेशंस, कि ये कंसेशंस आफ्टर ऑल हमें क्यों देने पड़े और किस तरह से इनको हम इस्तेमाल कर सकते हैं टू ऑगमेंट द लाइफ ऑफ आवर विजुअली इम्पेयर्ड ब्रदर्स एंड सिस्टर्स अक्रॉस द कंट्री.
राइट. तो आज आप हमें पहले फिलोसफिकल पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू बताएंगे?
जी हाँ, पहली बात तो मैं ये कहूँगा कि वर्ड कंसेशन जो यूज किया जाता है ये कोई अच्छा वर्ड नहीं है, क्योंकि कंसेशन मीन्स दैट यू हैव गिवन सम काइंड ऑफ डिस्काउंट और रिलैक्सेशन बाय वे ऑफ सम सिंपैथी और चैरिटी. आई थिंक इन टुडेज राइट बेस्ड अप्रोच वी शुड यूज द वर्ड enabling provisions.
Right.
And as far as facilities are concerned, I think the word which should substitute facilities should be support systems. जैसा कि आपने पहले ही कहा कि quoting Helen Keller that blindness is something that separates a person from person.
Right.
I'm not very sure of that. Helen Keller may have felt that in her time, but I think despite blindness, people across the globe have the ability, or individuals have the ability to perform, to feel, to have relationships, to interact, to be as productive, useful and meaningful citizens of society as anybody else.
But so that too,
so it is not blindness that separates person to person. It is the prejudices and values generally associated with blindness that separate person from person. हाँ जी, sorry.
Right, sir. But like I was saying कि it separates, according to Helen Keller, it separates person from person to person. But that too depends upon the requirements, the environmental situations. Like if the environmental situations are favorable,
Yes.
Yes, obvious that the child will have a proper interaction with the environment. He'll be able to learn, he'll be able to explore the things. But what if the proper environmental conditions is not there?
That's just the point. That's why we had to have enabling provisions and support system to ensure that proper environmental conditions are there for a visually impaired person to be as meaningful and productive a citizen as anyone else in society. So that's why the whole concept of concessions, what we call in concession popularly. So for the sake of convenience, I would stick to that term, though I personally may not agree with it, because the topic is that today, so obviously I should not depart too much from it. So the environment is affected by two things. One is the physical disability of the person, visual disability in this case. Because of visual disability, certain things that a person can normally do, a visually impaired person is unable to do. Because of visual impairment, certain functions, certain activities are not as easily performed by the person as by a person with sight. I won't say a normal person, because that does not mean that visually impaired persons are not normal. That again is a value system, which we unconsciously inherit.
Right.
So a person with sight and a visually impaired person, these are the two terms perhaps we should use in this program and in today's right-based approach. So, and second, of course, and more serious perhaps, the prejudices and the hindrances created by society. It is these prejudices and hindrances that actually come in the way of a visually impaired person performing those activities with ease and comfort, as much ease and comfort as say a person with sight. I like to refer to you here to the latest definition of disability, which I'm sure you may be aware, which is given in the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability, and that amplifies the point that I'm making. This UN Convention, I'll come to it later, of course, in detail, was passed by the United Nations General Assembly on 13th December 2006. It has been in effect since it was signed in 2007 by India, ratified in 2007 and now it is also in effect in this country. It's applicable because 20 countries which had signed this convention have also ratified it. So Article 1 of this convention is very relevant. I would read the second part of this article, which says, persons with disabilities include those who have long-term physical, mental, intellectual or sensory impairments which in interaction with various barriers may hinder their full and effective participation in society on an equal basis with others. So we see here, Kriti, that
Yes.
Disability, physical disability, and that in this context also includes visual disability,
Right.
is not a medical condition or a body condition. Any physical condition, according to this convention, becomes more a disability when it hinders your social interactions.
Right.
And that social interaction, as we had agreed earlier, is hindered by two factors. One, the barriers caused by the physical constraints, some physical constraints which are the outcome of the visual impairment, and secondly and more importantly, which this convention also recognizes, because of social barriers caused in social interactions, and those barriers are caused also by other people. So in order to remove those barriers and to create support system for persons with visual impairment, such support systems which would enable them to function in a social and a family environment with as much ease and convenience as a person, as enjoyed by a person with sight, certain provision had to be made legally and legislatively, and those were first in the form of certain facilities and concessions which were granted, and later on and more recently in the PWD Act, and even more recent than that, the UN Convention for the person with on the rights of persons with disabilities. This in brief is the background to which in which facilities and concessions, what we call concessions, are granted, so that we can enable a visually impaired person to live a life of dignity without taking undue support from external environment. So the emphasis here is on dignity, on self-sufficiency, and on performance. Performance equal to any other person who has sight. So these are the reasons why certain facilities and concessions have been extended. Yeah.
So likewise, you told the definition related to the UN Convention. What is probably the well accepted definition for the visual disability, for the visual impairment?
I said, very good question. There are two ways, Kriti, to look at this problem. One, of course, I remember reading a circular of Government of India dated 4th November 1977, and that was the first circular which provided 3% reservations for person with disabilities. You know, at that time the term which was in vogue was physically handicapped, and out of which 1% was for person with blindness, and no vision was not recognized as a separate category at that time. 1% for orthopedically handicapped, and the third 1% for the hearing impaired. In that circular, there is no definition of blindness given. I've been trying to trace that definition, in fact, for a very long time, and I haven't found it. So in 77, when the term blindness was used, what we would call visual impairment today, there is a history of this also, which I must share with you, why we use a broader term visually impaired and not blind. So that time there was no perhaps legally defined definition. Then came the Act of 1995. Of course, in between we had the WHO definitions, but the Act for the first time gave a definite statement on as to who would be termed a person with blindness and who would be termed a person with no vision. In fact, my colleague Sachu is here. I think she would be able to talk more about this. This is her area, as what is blindness constitutes and what no vision would constitute. Maybe we should ask her to do this. Yeah.
So, can we do it later on?
Okay. Yeah.
Right now, can you tell us the probable definition by WHO?
Okay. Yeah. No, I can tell you the PWD definition.
Okay.
And the blind person is one who has a vision less than 6/60. And a low vision person also, a similar definition is given in chapter 1, section 2, the definitions are given. But more than that, today's context, we have the social definition of disability, which I just quoted to you.
Right.
That, in our view, is more relevant than the medical definition. The medical definition is there in the Act, anybody can read that, that's not a problem at all. But I think gradually we have to move more towards a social definition of disability. Wherever disability is, any physical impairment is a hindrance in performance or interaction, that I think is disability.
Right.
Yeah, but legally speaking, the definition given in the Act would apply, and that is there in the Act. I suppose our viewers can look at that. There are many definitions given in that section, many definitions of disability, locomotor disability, and many others. And I think it's very important, as many of our viewers may be professionals, it's very important to be familiar with exactly this definition. That's why I'm not reading from the Act, though I have a copyright before me, because it's important to see that the viewers should look at that themselves and try to then, perhaps assess a blind person or visually impaired on the basis of those definitions, because legally those are the only one binding. We have not reached a level where courts and employers would accept the social definition, though I hope the day will soon come when that would happen.
So you're saying that we should identify the disability condition more in a social sense, like what hindrance it is playing on the person's part. Yeah, and what type of hindrance it plays on a person's part, on his daily living activities, whether it is making him like independent on others. So more onto the social part we have to look on, rather than confining to the definitions, the medically accepted definitions. We have to look at more in the social sense, because on the part of a visually impaired person, we have to identify the three aspects in order to maintain his dignity, his self-sufficiency, and his performance. So that has not yet been done, but we have to identify that in the more in the social sense. So progressing further, what are the first kind of concession which is being provided by the government?
So you see, now you mentioned a very important factor. What are the hindrances? We are talking all about philosophy, but come to brass tacks. What are the hindrances? What are the problems that a visually impaired person would definitely face in concrete terms, which need to be solved in order to create an equal environment for them to function in, as far as the context of this country is concerned. I think the first problem that a visually impaired person feels is social prejudice and the unwillingness of the family to support him or her in undertaking those tasks which ought to be taken by a person with or without sight.
Right.
And one of the first tasks that ought to be undertaken is education. So the government had to put in place systems and schemes which would enable a visually impaired person to access education in the real sense of the word. When I say real sense of the word, I mean education in all its dimension, in terms of admission, in terms of classroom accommodation, in terms of teacher preparedness, in terms of equipment, in terms of financial support, in terms of facility to take examinations, in terms of being able to access libraries, and so on and so on. I mean, education is just not admissions and exams as is normally understood. It is the essence of all these activities which make this one composite word called education. So the government had to put in place various schemes, facilities, and in some cases even relaxation of standards so that visually impaired persons could access education as I have defined it. Not the way we normally say education means take admission in a school or a college, when and attend classes and take examination. That is not. It's a process. It is just not a mechanical process. It's more of a social intellectual process. So what are those concessions then? We should come to that perhaps, you know. Of course, we must remember here that as such, no extra provision needed to be made to ensure education of the visually impaired persons, because the right to education is one of the fundamental rights, 7 fundamental rights of
Right.
Indian Constitution, granted to every citizen. And when we say granted to every citizen, obviously person with disabilities are not excluded from that. But obviously it was not happening. So the first step that the government took, and today also that's an important step, is by providing scholarships. Now there are scholarships. Earlier there were blanket scholarships only in terms of money, but now as far as visually impaired persons are concerned, financial support systems on the part of the government are in various parts depending on what level the student is. First we have the inclusive education scheme, Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan. Now in that covers up to class 8th normally, and normally students who are studying in normal regular schools are given a kit of equipments, basic equipments of course, grade slate, writing frame, cane, etc. They are also given support system in the form of approximately 600 rupees per student per month, so that all extra needs of the student, be it dress, be it any other extra need, can be taken care of with this money. This is at the primary and the middle level.
So those who are enrolled with the Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan only, they can avail this facility?
Yeah, this is for only those.
Okay, no concessions in the private schools?
No, not in the private schools as yet. Okay. Though actually speaking, as per the PWD Act, private schools should also be giving concessions, because these schools get recognition from the government. They get land in concession rate, on concession rate. They get electricity discount in electricity, water, etc. So as such, they receive substantial support, though not directly monetary support from government. And the PWD Act makes it very clear that any organization which receives substantial support is called, the term in the Act is establishment. And any establishment which is wholly or substantially funded by the government is covered by the Act. So we would argue from the NGO sector that private schools should also be covered, because without the government support they would not get, and therefore they should ensure facilities for education for the visually impaired students.
Right.
But they don't. As of now, if at all there are some discounts, those are individual based. An institution may decide to provide equipment, facilities, fee waivers, etc. But that is not under a legal framework.
And like you have told about the education kit, what does all it is included in the education
Yeah,
kit?
education kit would have equipments like a braille slate, tenor frame, the mathematical abacus, cane, or small equipments like that, which a student would need on a day-to-day basis.
So that's like the dissemination of the material is from a particular center, or like if the child is admitted to the school,
Yes.
then only then he is provided with this
Now,
special
only
kit.
when a child is admitted to a school that
Okay.
he or she is provided. It's not
Okay,
just
from the
he,
school.
because women also study these days. Yeah, it's he or she. When I'm one person who is very right-based. So,
And we are talking here the rights of the disabled person with the visual
yeah,
impairment.
so that is, only when he or she goes to school, the kit is provided. And obviously, as per chapter 5 of the Person with Disabilities Act, as
So I
a
would like to interrupt you here, but it's time for a short break, and we'll carry on with our discussion after a while. See you after a short
thank
break.
you. Yeah.
This is Aparna. She loves chess and Shah Rukh Khan. Her best friend is Swati. She also has visual impairment.
La 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 la
This is Neeraj.
la la हवा धीरे धीरे चल रही
He plays many instruments.
सुनो जो कहानी
He loves Mohammad Rafi
है
and cricket.
ये कहानी सदियों पुरानी है ये कहानी हमें सुना
He also uses crutches for mobility.
धीरे धीरे
चंदा है तू मेरा सूरज है तू
This is Raj Bala.
मेरी आँखों का तारा है तू जीती हूँ मैं बस तुझे देख कर
With her husband and daughter. She loves cooking and watching TV.
सूरज है तू आ मेरी आँखों का तारा है तू
She also has cerebral palsy. Look beyond the disability. Look at the person.
ऑटिज्म एक व्यापक विकासात्मक विकलांगता है जिसके लक्षण जीवन के प्रथम 3 वर्ष में ही दिखाई पड़ते हैं, जैसे असंगत खेल, असमान स्थूल एवं सूक्ष्म गामक क्रियाएं, शाब्दिक संकेतों पर अभिव्यक्ति न देना,
Where is the cup? देखो, open your eyes, open करो, open करके, open.
नियमित कार्यक्रम परिवर्तन का विरोध करना एवं अवलोकनीय शारीरिक उच्च स्तरीय या निम्न स्तरीय क्रियाकलाप। UNCRPD 2007 सेक्शन 1 ऑफ आर्टिकल 4 निशक्तता के क्षेत्र में कार्यरत प्रोफेशनल के प्रशिक्षण पर महत्व देता है। ऑटिज्म के क्षेत्र में सरकारी एवं गैर सरकारी संस्थाएं कार्यरत हैं जो भारतीय पुनर्वास परिषद द्वारा पंजीकृत हैं। सोसाइटी फॉर एडवांस स्टडी इन रिहैबिलिटेशन एक ऐसी ही गैर सरकारी संस्था है। कनिष्क 13 साल का एक ऑटिस्टिक बच्चा है जो इसी संस्था से प्रशिक्षण प्राप्त कर रहा है। असंगत क्रियाएं, कार्यकलापों में निरस्ता, असमान स्थूल एवं सूक्ष्म गामक क्रियाएं जैसे बॉडी रॉकिंग और फिंगर रिगलिंग उसमें देखी जा सकती है। उसे मैचिंग और पेस्टिंग, पॉइंटिंग जैसी क्रियाएं सिखाई जाती हैं।
वेरी गुड। ग्लास, वेयर इज द ग्लास?
जो खाली बैग है।
ग्लास, वेरी। कप को टच करो जल्दी से, कप को। वेयर इज द कप? वेरी गुड। कप में क्या करता है कनिष्क? टी पीता है। चलो ग्लास, वेयर इज द ग्लास? वेरी गुड। चलो बाउल की तरह, बाउल बाउल जल्दी से टच करो बाउल को। वेरी गुड। बाउल में क्या करता है कनिष्क?
तथा साथ ही साथ रोजमर्रा की आवश्यकताएं जैसे खाना, पीना, कपड़े पहनना, और व्यायाम संबंधी प्रशिक्षण दिया जाता है। ऑटिस्टिक बच्चों को भिन्न भिन्न प्रकार की कार्यविधियां उनके स्तर के अनुसार सिखाई जाती हैं। जैसे कुछ बच्चों के लिए कलरिंग विद इन वन एरिया, मैचिंग एंड आइडेंटिफिकेशन, फाइन मोटर स्किल्स, आई हैंड कोऑर्डिनेशन, concept of vegetables, fruits, body parts, कलर्स पर जोर दिया जाता है तथा कुछ को प्रश्न पढ़ के उत्तर देने में और रोजमर्रा की आवश्यकताओं को पूरा करने में सक्षम बनाया जाता है। इसके अलावा राइम्स, डांसिंग, सिंगिंग द्वारा लेजर एंड रिक्रिएशनल एक्टिविटीज में भाग लेने के लिए प्रोत्साहित किया जाता है। इन सभी कार्यकलापों एवं प्रशिक्षण का एकमात्र उद्देश्य उन्हें स्वनिर्भर बनाना है ताकि ये डगमगाते पांव सक्षम बन जीवन के एक एक पायदान पर दृढ़ता से आगे बढ़ें और अपनी मंजिल को पा लें। एक तारा टिमटिमाता, उसने आकाश को छू लिया। एक लौ जली कहीं, उसने अंधकार को मिटा दिया।
वेलकम बैक। ब्रेक पे जाने से पहले we were discussing about certain educational aspects which are available for the person with visual impairment. Basically, we talked about education. It's not just related to the admission only. It's related to the classroom instruction, the teacher preparedness, the library facilities, the facilities available during the exams, certain financial supports, and government has provided us a scheme in this, which is Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan, and basically it's for inclusive education basically. And in this there is it's a kit provided, educational kit provided for the persons with the visual impairment, for the students or the children with the visual impairment, in which they have a cane, a braille slate, and a abacus. And these things they have in the educational kit, plus additional 6,000 rupees.
600 per month.
600, okay.
Per
600
per month per student.
600 per month for per student it's been provided. And I would like to tell our viewers that we have another expert with us, Mrs. Sachu Ramalingam, and she's a consultant in the field of visual rehabilitation. Welcome to RCI Navshikha channel, ma'am.
Thank you so much for inviting me into this program.
Thank you, ma'am, for coming over here. जैसे सर हमें बता रहे थे एजुकेशनल एस्पेक्ट्स के बारे में, हमें सर्व शिक्षा अभियान के बारे में बताया सर ने, क्या क्या कंसेशन अवेलेबल है 600
before going forward, I wanted to point out to you, what does the Act say about facilities in terms of education? The education provisions are outlined in Chapter 5 of PWD Act, and Article 26 of that Act lays on certain very specific provisions as to what the government should do in order to promote the education of person with disabilities in general, and which also covers, of course, person with visual impairment.
Right.
The first point that this section talks about is that every child with disability has access to free education in an appropriate environment till he attains the age of 18 years. Now, as you know that as such under Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan and also as per our constitution, compulsory education is up to 14 years.
Right.
But in the case of person with disabilities, and that includes person with visual impairment, it is up to 18 years. Then the second point that this chapter talks about is to promote the integration of students with disabilities in normal schools. This is where the two schemes of the Ministry of Human Resource Development come in place. One is the Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan, which we were talking about earlier.
Right.
And other scheme which is applicable at the secondary level is the Integrated Education for Disabled Person scheme, IEDP. So those children who clear up after passing through the process of inclusive education up to the middle level, when they reach class 9, they are covered by the HRD ministry, the IEDP scheme. Number 3 in this act is promote setting up of special schools, and many special schools have been set up in India for person with visual impairment. There is an estimate that says that more than 350 special schools for person with visual impairment exist in India as of today. Then the fourth is to provide special equipments both to individuals and to institutions. So these are some of the definite provisions. Later on, of course, this chapter talks about providing education through informal methods, part-time classes for those who can't go to school, providing education through open schools and universities, giving exemption in questions related to mathematics in the examination, and providing a scribe. These are some of the specific facilities which are outlined in the PWD Act.
I would like to ask here from you, ma'am. Like sir told us about the different educational concessions which are provided by the government to persons with visual impairment. But are they actually followed in our country? Like all these facilities and all these concessions, are they actually availed by the visually impaired persons?
Those who are aware of it and those who are associated with some non-governmental organization, especially they are able to avail of this because of the support system that is provided by the NGOs. However, the utilization of these concessions is again limited to the schooling age mostly, and also to some extent the concessions related to the travel, they are utilized. But the rural disabled are even today not aware of the travel concessions, the basic requirements that they need as to how to avail a concession. A concession is utilized when they have a certificate for disability. So when that foundation is not there, availing these concessions becomes a barrier. So as of today, the concessions are utilized at the primary, secondary educational level. At the higher educational level, say for instance if there is a concession at examination fees in the higher education level in the universities, or if there is a concession in the fee at the college level or the post-graduation level, those concessions are still not reimbursed back to the students at in general by many of the universities. Similarly, when it comes to availing of scholarships, the higher education level scholarships are utilized at a better level than at the scholarships that are provided at the schooling level are very minimal. And so there again, the schools, if it is a special school, ensures that the equipments and facilities are provided to the student. But now that we are going into a phase of Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan and inclusive and integrated education, there are people who require scholarships but are not able to avail them.
So, as we know that our India, it's 70% of the rural population. India is considered basically 70% of the rural population. Do you think government should extend its support more to the rural areas rather than concentrating on these concessions? More measures should be.
No, it is going to do. I would beg to disagree with her a bit, with due respect to my
The government
colleague.
has given it, but
the money is being transferred.
The money is being transferred.
Definitely, schools are getting it. Even rural areas, children are getting this facility in inclusive education. That is not the case. All those children, you see, it's a different issue whether children are not able to go to school. But all those children, from many states we have the report that children who are going to schools under the Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan are getting facilities in terms of books and equipments and support, financial support where and where required. The problem as far as Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan is, Kriti, are two. Number one, the availability of brain books, which was a problem, but our organization, the All India Confederation of the Blind, we have taken up this issue very intensively with the HRD ministry and through court cases, also public interest litigations. And now the Ministry of Human Resource Development has earmarked funds for each state separately to provide brain books. So there's no shortage of funds as far as, and our organizations, we at AICB have the largest and the fastest brain press of the country. We have 3 Bredo 400 embossers. Our brain printing capacity is roughly 40,000 pages per day, which is not even with the government of India as of now. And we have ourselves printed books for Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan for many states. So, but the problem there is the preparedness of the teachers.
Right.
The teachers are not competent to teach the students because they are not exposed and prepared, and there is a lack of resource teachers. To that extent, the system is not working fine. But as far as the facilities and the equipments are concerned, these are of course being taken care of. And when the students reach the higher education, supports are provided under the IEDP, as I mentioned, from class 9th to the, and the children which are not able to go to inclusive education, they go to special schools which are set up for visually impaired persons in various parts of the country. As I told you, there are 350 and maybe more than that special schools for the visually impaired. Now these schools are supported by the Government of India, by the Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment, through a scheme called Grant in Aid scheme.
Okay.
Now there's much to be desired in this scheme because the support provided is far from being adequate. You can well imagine a principal in this scheme, principal of a school gets around 8,200 rupees, which is the salary of a contract worker under the central government new pay commission rules. 8,200 rupees, and a teacher gets in the range of PGT teacher would get 6,900 rupees, a middle level teacher gets 58, and a primary teacher 3,800 rupees. I don't think any employee of Government of India, not even a PN, is getting 3,800 rupees.
So don't you think that's also a drawback?
That is a serious drawback, and that has seriously hampered the quality of special schools as far as this country is concerned. And now we are in an ironic situation. Whereas on one hand, children in regular schools are getting a lot of support systems.
Right.
They're getting brain books, visually impaired children, equipment, financial support. Because of lack of attention being paid to the special schools, the quality of students and teachers is deteriorating there day by day.
Right.
Competent teachers are not available, though the government does provide, I think, around 850 rupees per student per month as support system. And some money is provided for equipments and furniture, but far from being adequate as far as the present scenario is concerned.
Right.
So the school education is supported and subsidized, facilitated, if I use the word, given at a concession rate, whatever you want to use it, by the government through these two methods, the inclusive education, the IEDP, and the special schools. This is the school. And of course, when they come to class 11th and 12th, the students get cassette recorders and scholarships, etc. are upgraded.
And I would like to ask ma'am here, like sir said, like Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan, it's also been working in the rural areas. But like it's mainly through the government schools or NGOs or special schools, or the private sectors are also like implying there also, apart from the government schools, which is like more prevalent there in the rural areas, the government schools or the NGOs?
It is mostly the government schools, but NGO, the government in every state, they or in a particular revenue district, they have identified a particular NGO as the channelizing agency to implement Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan in the non-government schools through the NGOs. So say for instance there are 5 NGOs in Uttar Pradesh, or there are 5 NGOs in Tamil Nadu. One NGO is given the responsibility of all the students who under the SSA educational system to monitor and ensure that the required facilities and equipment and other concessions are reaching them.
And like according to a recent like right to education law, there's a clause in that कि there should be easy access to all the nearby local schools. Means no school the nearby in the local community of a student cannot deny the admission to the student.
That is important. Yeah, that's an important sea change that has happened. When we were student, I was a student, for instance. I belong to a town called Rohtak, which is very near Delhi, 2 hours journey in Haryana. But my parents could not conceive, that's a word, could not conceive of sending me to a normal school, a regular school in the city. But that scenario has totally changed now. Now, no school, as per this Act, also PWD Act, that's why the topic PWD Act and concession is very relevant, because many concessions and facilities have now got a new meaning altogether because of this Act. These may have been there earlier, but they have got a new meaning altogether. Right. So now no school can deny admission. In fact, the recognition of the school can be withdrawn in case a school denies admission to a visually impaired child. And that, you're right, is an important sea change as far as the regular schools are concerned. But there are still many children who are not able to study regular. Yeah, so they go to special school. You're talking about the private NGOs running schools. See, one of the provisions in this Act is that every institution for the disabled, and that includes every institution for visually impaired, has to be registered by the government.
Right.
No individual can run an institution without getting it registered. Now, unfortunately, that has not been strictly followed. Because registration doesn't mean only a certificate, by government, okay, you can have permission. It also means continuous monitoring, ensuring the quality of, education, teachers, facilities, etc. There are 2 or 3 kinds of schools which are running in the private sector, as per special schools for the blind are concerned. One are schools which are maintained by NGOs, but they're getting grant under this grant in aid scheme I told you about. The government supports that. There is some quality control there, because obviously when the grant is given, the inspection is there, reports are sent. Every year the grant is renewed depending on your performance. So those schools are doing reasonably well. And I'm not including in this the government schools which are fully run by the government anyway. And there the government salaries are being paid. Then there are some private entities which are running schools without getting grant under the grant in aid scheme. Those schools are in doldrums. That's the honest truth. Though, because there's no quality control, there's no money also, the teachers are not fully qualified, but children have no choice. They have obviously have to study somewhere, so they go there out of compulsion of one kind or other. And those are the kind of institutions which are a serious cause for worry for us.
Right.
Yeah.
They have just made the thing like no school can deny the admission to a student coming to their school. But what about the training of the teachers? What about the proper facilities into the school?
This is where RCI comes in. We are at Navshikhar Charan. when the RCI Act of 1992 has done wonderful work, and the standards as far as the training and registration of professionals is concerned are now in place, and the RCI has syllabi tie up with the universities and various institutions. So the training part is taken care of quite well, but then not all teachers are being trained, because some of the courses are not being done as efficiently. And not just by RCI, the problem is that you may have absolute very good policies and very good provisions, but as the implementation stage, ultimately RCI cannot enter everywhere and start implementing and training every teacher. So the implementation stage, things may go wrong. Also, a lot of training, as for the visually impaired students are concerned, a lot of training is being done by the National Institute of Visually Handicapped Training Institutes. They have around 10 teacher training centers all over the country, and those are also playing a vital role in ensuring training or otherwise of teachers. I'm using training or otherwise because some of the training centers do not have the adequate infrastructure and facilities, not even special educated trainers. In fact, our organization filed an RTI recently, and we got to know that many centers lack the basic equipment and basic trainers for training of special educators. So when you don't obviously have basic trainers, how are you going to train special educators? But now things are in place, and I think a lot of development has taken place during recent months. But training is important, yes, and if the training is not in place, education cannot be supported.
like talking more in the like specifically in the rural area, the rural sector, I would like to ask ma'am, how would parents identify like which kind of school is best suitable for their visually impaired child, which have proper facilities and all? Is there any governing agency in between who can guide their parents to the appropriate school? Because in urban area the parents are well educated, they can identify the proper schools which have proper facilities and teachers available. But what about the rural sector? Is there any governing agency in between who can like guide the parents to the appropriate center, appropriate school?
In fact, that is the reason why, because the parents of the rural area did not have access to information and services and schools for the visually impaired. Most of these schools used to be in the metropolitan states, especially Chennai, Bombay, Calcutta, Delhi. So that's how this whole concept or strategy change began of community-based rehabilitation.
Right.
So now NGOs and also to some extent with the support or financial support from INGOs, there are various community-based programs that are in all of the states. I can name a few, like say Gujarat has got a very good community-based rehabilitation. Similarly in Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh, Rajasthan. Here community-based rehabilitation programs become the source of information where the services are taken to the doorstep of the disabled people's family. So that becomes a channelizing and dissemination force of information to the people, and to some extent there are resource centers in the community that are set up within a particular radius, so that these disabled people can utilize the special resources that is required. Say for instance, a child in a rural area is going to a regular school under the SSA, and if they want certain remedial teaching, the community-based rehabilitation provides that remedial teaching in their resource center, and would also send their resource teachers or itinerant teachers to the school to provide support services. So in the rural area, to reach out to the large population, community-based rehabilitation has evolved as a strategy that is being implemented.
Very well said, ma'am. Sir, would you like to add something?
No, I just want to come up to now. I said we had talked enough about the school. Maybe two more areas of education: college and open learning.
Okay.
This is where a lot of concessions are available. So when a student passes school and goes to higher education, the government of India has a strong scholarship scheme, the Special Welfare Fund for the Blind, which is run by the Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment, and that provides as 500 new scholarships to visually impaired persons. Specifically, this is now specifically visually impaired person. This is not a total disability area. This is visually impaired I'm talking about,
Okay.
right? There may be others for other disabilities. I'm not covering that right now. And the scholarship are valued at around the range of 700 to 1,000 rupees per month. Also, there is a fee waiver scheme up to rupees 10,000 per year for a visually impaired person for the paying fees for the various enrollment of various courses is concerned. So if a student is unable to pay fee for a professional course or a course, he or she can get waiver up to rupees 10,000 per month, and support is provided by the Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment. Thirdly, an important scheme is the Aids and Appliances Scheme, ADIP scheme of Government of India. Under this, necessary equipments are provided to person with visual impairment, and now the amount has been augmented. So a visually impaired person can also perhaps buy brainers, brain typewriters with this money, cassette recorders, duplicators, or any other basic equipments which are required for his or her study. This amount is still not sufficient to cover computers. Well, if you can get a computers in 10,000, fine, but as such it's not sufficient. It surely doesn't cover JAWS software, screen reader, which is required to access computers, because that the minimum cost for that is around 19,000 as of today for a single JAWS key. So though the scheme is there to provide equipments and aids and appliances and has supported, I think in today's scenario, the scheme is inadequate because it is not able to meet the technological requirements of the visually impaired students. And also the scheme is not compatible with similar schemes abroad. You see, when we say we are becoming a developed country, we want a permanent seat in United Nations, we are a developed nation, we are going to achieve 9% growth, all those things. These are not just economic indicators.
Right.
A country cannot be a developed country unless you are also socially developed. So Western countries, which are called technically developed countries, have put systems in place to ensure social safety and availability of equipments to the visually impaired persons. I myself seen very many countries abroad, the most advanced equipments being available even to school children. Unfortunately, in India, that is not the case. The scheme is there. So scholarships, equipments, fee waivers, and from this year onward, the NHFDC is going to maintain this scheme. There's also a loan scheme that in case you want to do a professional scheme course and you are not able to finance that course, visually impaired person can take loan on very easy terms from NHFDC. So these are some of the facilities available as far as the government is concerned, higher education. As far as other facilities are, you see, many universities provide their own facilities. Of course, before I come to that, I should not fail to mention the 3% reservation, which has significantly increased the number of enrollments in the colleges and universities. Section 39, again I would refer to PWD Act here. Section 39 of the Act clearly specifies that 3% seats in all education institutions should be reserved for persons with disabilities. So now no college, just as no school can deny admission, no college can also deny admission to a person with visual impairment, and that has helped many visually impaired persons to come forward and study in colleges, which was not the case earlier. So enrollment has increased because of this provision of the Act. This is also an enabling provision. Many universities have their own schemes, like providing readers, providing books, cassette recorders, special financial aid in needy cases, or any other such a scheme. Like the Delhi University has set up a special center for visually impaired students. It's called the Computer Resource Center. They have scanners, brain displays, latest technology for the visually impaired. But these are specific university-based schemes. Many states also supplement the scholarship and other facilities being provided to college students. For instance, the Delhi government provides a facility of 600 rupees per month to college going students, those who are not able to get, I suppose, the scholarship of the Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment. The third aspect of this problem is the open learning system. Now, there IGNOU and many other distance learning universities have come forward, not to just start need-based courses for person with visual impairment, but also provide facilities like providing their materials in alternative format, online materials, giving facilities of using computers in the examination. In fact, there's a UGC circular that now the Act, what does the Act say? Act says that every visually impaired person should be allowed the use of scribe. But the UGC, the University Grant Commission, has gone even further to say that if a visually impaired person can write his or her own examination by using computers. And there have been some cases, no, all universities have not accepted it. There have been some cases where visually impaired students have used computers to write their own examination, and there's a very important leap forward and very important facility being extended to visually impaired students, because when you use a scribe, the chances of making mistakes are more sometimes, because scribe may not know spelling, formatting, may mishear what you are saying, miscommunication and all that. So those risks are eliminated when you're using computers yourself. Also, some institutions of higher education and universities do provide relaxation in marks for admission. Of course, one is reservation, but despite reservation, in case you need a further assistance and enabling provision, in your word concession, there is a relaxation of mark being provided by many universities. Like in Delhi University, I know the case, we provide relaxation in marks up to 10%. So these are, though the facilities are not by the central government, but obviously these are government facilities, because the universities are funded by government money, either the state or the central level. So these also augment the educational prospects of visually impaired students.
Right, sir.
Yeah.
And and we discussed a lot of concessions at the school, at the university, and at the college level. And we'll further carry on with discussion after a short break. See you after a while.
The state of knowledge exists. The will, the capacity, and method are usually the problem. मानसिक मंदता एक ऐसी विकलांगता है जो 18 वर्ष की आयु से पूर्व कभी भी हो सकती है, जिसमें व्यवहार अनुकूलता में कमी एवं बुद्धि क्षमता 70% से कम होती है। Alone we can do so little. Together we can do so much. भारतीय पुनर्वास परिषद द्वारा देश भर में पंजीकृत केंद्र इस बात को प्रमाणित करते हैं। NIMH प्रादेशिक केंद्र नई दिल्ली एक ऐसा ही केंद्र है जहां छात्रों को प्रशिक्षण दिया जाता है। जिसके उपरांत वे मंद बुद्धि बच्चों की सेवा में नियुक्त होते हैं। क्लासरूम टीचिंग, ग्रुप टीचिंग एवं भारतीय पुनर्वास परिषद के नव शिखर चैनल पर प्रसारित टेलीकॉन्फ्रेंसेस द्वारा संबंधित विषयों पर विस्तार पूर्वक ज्ञान दिया जाता है। मेडिकल, ऑक्यूपेशनल थेरेपी, फिजियोथेरेपी, स्पीच थेरेपी, साइकोलॉजी और स्पेशल एजुकेशन जैसे क्षेत्रों में छात्रों को प्रशिक्षित किया जाता है। प्रयोगात्मक अनुभव एवं अभ्यास के लिए टीचर ट्रेनिंग प्रोग्राम के उपरांत छात्रों को मंद बुद्धि बच्चों के साथ कक्षाओं में नियुक्त किया जाता है और इंडिविजुअलाइज्ड एजुकेशन प्लान का भी आधार बनाया जाता है, जिससे वे संपूर्ण शिक्षा एवं चिकित्सा शैली को समझ सकें। इस पूरे प्रशिक्षण कार्यक्रम के दौरान विद्यार्थी जर्नल्स, न्यूज़लेटर्स, पेरियोडिकल्स, चार्ट्स, मॉडल्स, कंप्यूटर ट्रेनिंग एवं टेक्स्ट बुक्स का उपयोग कर सकते हैं। कहते हैं, कीप योर फेस टू द सनशाइन एंड यू कैन नॉट सी द शैडो। इसी बात को ध्यान में रखते हुए विद्यार्थियों को सरकारी एवं गैर सरकारी संस्थाओं में नियुक्त किया जाता है, जहां वे मंद बुद्धि बच्चों के लिए निरीक्षण, प्रशिक्षण एवं अनुसंधान का दायित्व संभालते हैं और इसके पश्चात ये विद्यार्थी इस प्रशिक्षण का उपयोग मंद बुद्धि बच्चों के सामाजिक एवं शैक्षणिक उत्थान एवं विकास में करते हैं और एक लक्ष्य की ओर आगे बढ़ते हैं। और फिर लक्ष्य कितना ही दूर हो, फासला नजरों का धोखा भी तो हो सकता है। वो मिले या ना मिले, हाथ बढ़ाकर देखो।
Welcome back. ब्रेक पे जाने से पहले we talked about certain educational concessions. We talked about the Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan, IEDP scheme, then the provision of the scribe, the role of the open schools and the special schools, and the provision of the special equipments being provided. Then we talked about the EDIP scheme, the NHFDC part, the 3% concessions, and also the different universities, they have the different kind of concessions available.
Very good
Plus-
memory, I must say.
Thank you, sir. And there's a scholarship which is also being provided, ranging from 700 to 1,000 per month at the college level or the university level. I would like to ask you, ma'am, sir told us about the NHFDC scheme, which is providing a loan to the persons with visual impairment. So what is this loan amount, and what is the time period for the repayment? Could you please probably have a light on this?
Yeah, NHFTC has 4 main schemes that they implement. One is the microfinance scheme. The second is loan for any business. It can be for small scale business. The loan is given from 3 lakhs to 5 lakhs. If someone wants to do a little larger scale business, then it goes up to 10 lakhs. And if someone wants to set up an industry or set up a factory unit, then the loan also goes up to 20 to 25 lakhs. The interest rate is very low, and there's a 1% waiver of interest for women with disabilities. The third scheme, now that the scholarship would be implemented through the NHFDC. So the applications have to go to NHFDC. In fact, today is the last date for the scholarships. There are 500 national scholarships that would be given. Under the scholarship scheme itself, they can also apply for the educational purposes, computers with screen readers, which we were talking about earlier. So they can take a soft loan on this, and they can use this for the educational purposes. And also the fourth area that they provide support is loan for pursuing higher education in terms of professional courses and technical courses. So they can take a soft loan from NHFDC. Now NHFDC, National Handicap Finance and Development Corporation, is at Faridabad, but every state has a state channelizing agency, and the Delhi, for instance Delhi, the state channelizing agency would be the Cooperative Society for Poverty Elevation, which is in Rohini. And similarly, every state has got a channelizing agency, though they have now waived the rule that apart from the loan that goes for the business purposes, they can apply straight to the NHFDC, like in terms of microfinance and the scholarship schemes. Also, as we were moving and talking about the facility of having computers where they can give their exams in higher education, we do have this facility already being implemented for the last 3 to 4 years in the CBSE board, where the 10th board, in the 10th board, students have been provided computers with the relevant screen reading softwares, where various students have given their examinations on the computers. So since CBSE is a board that is available across India in all the states, students can avail of this by attaching their certificate for disability when they are applying for the examination, and this goes through the school. The school has to take the relevant action so that the child can be provided with the facility at the time of taking his exam.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. So would you like to add?
Yeah, I have 3 more issues I'd like to talk about as far as education is concerned, and maybe then we could go to employment, because that's another important area of concessions and facilities. One, alternative questions in lieu of mathematics. This is a provision demanded by Section 30 of the Persons with Disabilities Act, that instead of mathematics there should be alternative question, which is being followed by CBSE up to class 10th. The problem is when child wants to study maths or science as an optional subject, as a subject choosing voluntarily. Up to class 10th, mathematics is compulsory, so the alternative questions are provided. But what happens to a student when he or she wants to study these subjects after class 10th? Because at that stage these subjects are not mandatory. So there is a serious debate going on that, and we are arguing for concessions and alternative questions even in that stage, because every child has the right to study a subject of his or her choice. And that is a mathematics. Of course, even in the competitive examination, now alternative questions are provided in your maths. Not in all competitive examination, but in quite a few of them, this provision is being followed. The second issue to do with curricula is to
I
make.
would like to interrupt you here, but we have a call coming up.
Yeah.
And Hanji,
I can't hear.
so actually this is Rohit from Calcutta. He's calling up. And what's your question? Okay. Could you please repeat your question? So he's asking, how do you consider blindness, whether it's a curse or a disguise in...
Yes, very interesting question. There is a series called Muthuswamy series. All the government provisions, orders are compiled by Muthuswamy in various volumes. Muthuswamy and Bindra. And I was reading his writing on disability just the other day. And he begins, the first para of his digest on disability begins by saying, these unfortunate brothers. So I was very surprised that even in 2009, a government publication is using terms like these unfortunate brothers of ours. This term was used for a person with disabilities. So when blindness is neither a curse nor a benefit, where it's as good or as bad as saying that being 5'7" is a curse and being 5'8" is a benefit. It's a physical condition, like any other physical condition. It has its advantages and disadvantages, and I think we should treat it very factually, not religiously, not emotionally, not philosophically. It's a factual and physical condition, and let's treat it as that and not go beyond that. That is the best way to overcome blindness. When you don't give, the problem with most visually impaired persons, I'm saying this on camera, the problem with most visually impaired persons is that they get too much importance to their blindness and disability. I think we should try to get over that mental makeup ourselves. We expect top of prejudices of society. How much have we done to overcome prejudices of ourselves, of our own selves? Unless we are able to be comfortable with our disability, we can't expect others to be comfortable with our disability. So it's none of the two. If you think 5'8" is an advantage and 5'7" is a curse, then you can draw your own conclusion. But to me, it's just a physical condition.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. So can we just progress on to our next?
Yeah, after three things. So the alternative question, the next important factor as far as education is concerned is accessible curricula. And since curricula which is sensitized, this was desired under the Act, it is mandated now under the UN Convention. That's why I have both the brain books on my table, because now any provision of the PWD Act has to be seen in relation to what the convention demands of it. Because we as a country, India as a state, and the Indian government has willingly, deliberately, voluntarily signed and ratified the convention. Nobody asked it to do so. I mean, we are lobbied NGOs, but they are not under any duress to do so. They have agreed. So now they are duty bound, as convention is a hard instrument. The government of India is duty bound to implement all the provisions which are there in the convention. And this is a mandate of the convention that curricula should be accessible, Article 24 of the convention. So a lot of work is being done in this direction, especially the look and learn method. The NGOs are trying to fight this issue, that the text should be accessible, the photograph should be all described in words, and hopefully in the next few years you will see more sensitive and more accessible textbooks. Now as far as education is concerned, and I clarified right in the beginning that education is just not admission and examination. It is overall development of a personality through various modes, and one of those modes is exposures to the written word. The written word in terms of journal reading material, magazines, books of information, secondary reading material, if you're doing a specialized course, etc. Now, while the government may not be doing much in that direction, but many NGOs, and of course the National Institute for the Visually Handicapped, that's a part of the government of India, autonomous body though, is doing a lot to promote that kind of accessibility to the visually impaired person. I'll first come to the National Institute for the Visually Handicapped, which is located in Dehradun. They have a number of projects to promote education, and those projects are doing very well. They have a special school for the blind. the equipments are manufactured. A large number of equipments for to be used by the visually impaired persons are manufactured there. The training of teachers is largely coordinated and controlled by NIVH. They have 10 teacher training centers across the country. They have a huge brain press, also using Braille 400 and maybe higher machines now, which produces not just educational books but a lot of journal reading materials and magazines, and a recording studio and a library from where books are sent by post all over the country free of cost. I'm not sure whether there are many libraries in the country, even for persons with sight, which send books all over the country, any title and without a cost. So that's a very important service and facility provided to visually impaired persons in terms of education, which makes them exposed to journal reading materials, entertainment materials and information which is current from magazines. Then comes the role of NGOs. I'd like to mention at this stage, and maybe after we have a break, the next break, we will show you a documentary also. There are 3 national NGOs in the country, and these are All India Confederation of the Blind, which is located, the headquarters are in Rohini, Delhi. I happen to be the vice president of that organization. Mr. J.N. Kaur is our founder and general secretary. Sachu is also the secretary of AICB. So we both from same organization. The National Federation of the Blind, with headquarters in Delhi, and they have a number of branches across the country. We have 22 affiliates at AICB across the country. And the National Association for the Blind, India, which has its headquarters in Mumbai. These 3 NGOs are doing pioneering work and very important work to supplement government's effort as far as the education for visually impaired students is concerned. A lot of projects are being run by these 3 NGOs to support the education of the visually impaired persons. So those visually impaired students who are not able to access government facility can approach any of these 3 NGOs and they will not be disappointed, I assure you of that. Now talking specifically of AICB, our own organization, we have a merit scholarship scheme for visually impaired girl, in which every visually impaired girl who gets over 50% marks is supported by financial assistance of ₹1,000 at the undergraduate level, ₹1,250 per month for the B.Ed, and ₹1,500 for the masters and above. Any visually impaired girl who has got more than 50% marks in the previous exam can apply for these scholarships. We have a hostel for blind girls going to college students, but that I will not talk much about right now. A more important aspect of our work in terms of education is the recording studio. And I know the National Association for the Blind, Bombay, also has a very strong project on recording studio. A lot of books are being recorded which are useful for college going students, not just books, even magazines and other information material which students would like to access but they don't have access. Visually impaired students would like to access but they don't have ready access of this material. And also providing of equipments, training in computers, so the visually impaired college going students can do their own assignment, own work, own net surfing. That computer training is being conducted by all the 3 organizations: National Association for the Blind, National Federation of the Blind, and All India Confederation of the Blind. So these are some, and also the scholarship scheme is also run by NFB. They provide scholarship in terms of payment of fees and many other facilities, which you can find out from their website or by contacting the headquarters. So these 3 organizations are doing important work, very important, and I want to say supplementing. I think their attempts are as good as the government own attempt, because without their intervention, the education of the visually impaired person would not be at the level at which it is today. I think this is all one has to say as far as facilities and concessions for education are concerned. Kriti, any questions?
Yes sir, जो आपने scribe की बात करी थी, the provision of the scribe, how can a visually impaired or VI person can avail that facility? Yes,
there are some standard rules as far as the use of scribe is concerned, which are under review. In fact, on 20th February 2008, a meeting was held of various departments and representatives from various departments and ministries in the office of the Chief Commissioners for Persons with Disabilities, and new norms were finalized. Unfortunately, those yet are not notified by the Department of Persons and Training and other relevant agencies. As of now, the scribe has to be one class lower than the qualification of the candidate. So suppose a student is appearing for the BA final examination, then the scribe must be of BA second year, and he or she should not have scored more than a certain percentage. Mostly it's 50%. In some places now it's made 55% also in some competitive examination. By the universities we are maintaining at around 50% marks. The scribe should not get more than 50% mark. Now remember, Kriti, when this rule was made, this was many years ago. The same rule was in place when I was a student, which was around 32 years ago. One shouldn't tell one say on camera like this. But anyway, so obviously at that time 50% meant a lot, because not many people got more than 50%.
Right.
But today we are living in a scenario when if you get a first division or 65%, you will not get admission in a college.
Right.
So the relative framework of 50% has totally changed, and there is surely a need for newer and more relevant norms which are in place, and hopefully we will have more comfortable norms, because many visually impaired persons are having problems finding suitable scribes.
The person can contact directly from the ministry to have a scribe?
No. You see, there are two ways. When you want to take an exam, either you can take your own scribe,
Okay.
or you can request the institution concerned where you are studying. I'm talking about education right now.
Okay.
Where you are studying to provide scribe. Now, as someone who is deeply involved with the university teaching for a very long time, the problem we face is that visually impaired students do not inform us in time that they want to avail a scribe. They would come on the morning of the examination, sir, हमें scribe चाहिए, कहाँ से लाएंगे? So it is also the duty of the student to get in touch with the institution, and if you're taking competitive examination, obviously with the center where your competitive exam is going to be held, well before time, and to apprise them of the requirements so that necessary arrangements could be made.
Right.
Yeah, this is about scribe.
And ma'am, like Shah told about the 3% reservation into the universities. So that's for visually impaired, how much that accounts for?
It
from
is
among
1% for the visually impaired, including low vision and blindness.
Okay. So that's just all for the educational concession. Can we move ahead?
Yeah, now we come to employment, a very important area after education, because after you finish your degrees, acquiring degrees, what would you do?
Right.
You like to look for a job, because family will not support you beyond a certain time, schools will not keep you, colleges will not keep you, your scholarship would lapse. So even for nothing else, you need a job to sustain yourself and also for your dignity and identity in society. So there are a number of provisions available as far as employment of the visually impaired persons is concerned. Chapter 6, I may mention here, of the Person with Disability Act, and here I am on chapter 6 in my brain text, deals specifically with employment. Now, I may mention here, I think earlier in the program sometime I did mention about an OM of 4th November 1977, which for the first time reserved 3% vacancies for the disabled person, and 1% of that was for visually impaired persons. But this was only in C and D category. The philosophy behind reserving positions, posts or vacancies in the government was the same as for education, that because of prejudices, even when visually impaired persons were qualified, they were not able to get the required, relevant and appropriate employment. This was not a legislation in 1977, this was an office order brought about because of the lobbying and networking of various organizations working for the blind and of the blind. It had some effect. So to augment the effect of this OM, in 1986, for the first time, a list of identified posts was brought out by the Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment, and then called, of course, Ministry of Social Welfare in 1986. The nomenclature was different. This was required because even when reservation was there, employers would say, how would a blind person work on this post? So to preempt that objection and to answer it, the Government of India brought out a list where these are the posts which we know are suitable for a blind person, for a visually impaired person. These are the posts on which a visually impaired person can function. So now you can't deny employment as far as C and D posts are concerned. You can't deny employment on these posts because we have identified them. This was said in 1986. In 1989, a further step was taken when reservations in promotions in C and D category were affected. You see, you may employ a person, but you may not promote the person.
Right.
So, to overcome this problem, reservation in promotion was affected in 1989. And when the Act came in 1995, this reservation was maintained. And it was further extended to Group A and B services. The difference, however, this is very important for us to know, that as of now, as far as reservation in vacancies on various posts in category C and D of Government of India is concerned, it is on total number of posts in that organization. As far as reservation in A and B is concerned, it is on vacancies on identified posts.
Okay.
Though there is a High Court order of Delhi High Court dated 19th December 2008 in the matter of National Federation of the Blind versus the Union of India. This was the case, and the Delhi High Court has ruled in that reservation even in A and B categories should be on the total number of posts. This clause of the order is under challenge in the Supreme Court of India by the government. Very strange. The Government of India is challenging a provision which would enable the employment of, which will augment the employment of the visually impaired persons. Rather than supporting that, the government is challenging that decision. That shows the concern the Government of India may have for the disabled person, that you don't want to give them the benefit which courts think is legally justified in their right. But that apart, we will not go into that right now. So as far as the reservation in A and B is concerned, since that judgment of the Delhi High Court has not been notified by Department of Personnel and Training, it is on identified posts. 3% of the vacancies on the identified posts is for the disabled, and 1% of that, out of the 3%, 1% is for the visually impaired. In fact, now I would like to make this very clear. Many advertisements are seen in newspaper where say the reservation for the physically handicapped person will be as per the government policies and rules. I recently saw, or they say 3% of the vacancies are reserved for the physically handicapped. Both such kind of advertisements are incorrect and should be objected to. Every organization which is covered by the PWD Act has to specify the exact number of vacancies which are reserved for each category of disability, and for that they are supposed to maintain a 100-point roster, which most of them are not doing. So if an advertisement is a blanket advertisement, the 3% vacancies, that is a null and void advertisement and can be objected to. Also, the term physically handicapped is an incorrect term in today's context.
Right.
Because now, as far as the reservation in employment is concerned, it is specified. The 1% for blind and low vision, 1% for this category. That specific term which is used in section 33 has to be mentioned. So this is to do with reservation in employment.
So ये तो government sector की बात होगी. What about the private sector?
Now, in private sector, for no category is there any reservation. Even for the SC, ST, so far there is no reservation. However, the Act makes it clear, it makes it desirable for private sector to create employment for the visually impaired persons, and for that, the Act says that incentive should be given to the private sector. Now, for this purpose, the Government of India has brought out a scheme in 2008. It was in 2008 budget and applicable from 1st April 2008, where any private organization employing a disabled person, and that includes a visually impaired person, who is drawing a salary up to 25,000 rupees, the EPF and the gratuity contribution of that would be paid by the employer, by the Government of India. The employer's contribution would be paid by the Government of India.
Okay.
So the employer is exempt from paying that contribution for 3 years. This is one incentive the government has given to ensure recruitment of persons with disabilities in employment as far as the private sector is concerned.
But what about the reservation thing? Is there any reservation?
No. For no one in the private sector, even for the SC, STs, obviously there is no reservation for these categories in private sector. So obviously then for person with disabilities also there is no reservation.
Only that the private sectors have been sensitized to take and employ persons with disabilities, and they have been doing it so under their CSR program. And in the private sector, it is action of being sensitive to the cause rather than being implemented by the or forced upon by the government.
Okay, so far we discussed about the certain educational concessions and we discussed about the employment concessions. And basically these are 1% for the visually impaired on the identified post, and that too in the government sector. And if we talk about the private sector, then the government of India provided an incentive to the private sector for giving the amount to the employed person for 3 years on the part of the private institutions. So that's all for the employment section.
No, that's not at all. There's much more.
Okay, but that will be discussed after
the
a break.
break.
Yeah, we'll see after a break.
हम होंगे कामयाब, हम होंगे कामयाब, हम होंगे कामयाब एक दिन। ओ मन में है विश्वास, पूरा है विश्वास, हम होंगे कामयाब एक दिन। We shall overcome, we shall overcome, we shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe that we shall overcome someday. We shall overcome someday. We shall overcome someday.
The chief handicap of the blindness is not blindness, but the attitude of seeing people towards them. आइए जानने और समझने की कोशिश करते हैं कि बधिरांधता यानी डेफ ब्लाइंडनेस क्या है। बधिरांधता एक स्थिति है जिसमें दृष्टिहीनता एवं सुनने की शक्ति में कमी आती है तथा जिससे विचारों के आदान प्रदान और रोजमर्रा की आवश्यकताओं की पूर्ति में समस्या उत्पन्न होती है। बलराम एक 9 साल का बधिरांध बच्चा है। वो एक प्रीमैच्योर बच्चा है जिसका शारीरिक विकास उसकी आयु के अनुरूप नहीं हुआ था। वो एक निम्न वर्गीय श्रेणी से संबंध रखता है तथा 5 साल से लगातार नेशनल एसोसिएशन फॉर ब्लाइंड दिल्ली के प्रशिक्षण कार्यक्रम से संलग्न है। इन 5 सालों के अंतर्गत उसे रोजमर्रा के कामों में, हलन चलन में, उसकी शैक्षणिक जरूरतों के अनुसार संप्रेषण द्वारा प्रशिक्षण दिया गया है जिससे वो इन सब क्रियाओं में स्वावलंबी बन सके। बलराम बिना किसी सहायता के चाकू से फलों को काट सकता है। उनके छिलकों को कूड़ेदान में डाल सकता है। अपने बर्तनों को खुद साफ कर सकता है। उन्हें सही जगह पर रख सकता है। सही बर्तनों का चयन करके खुद खाना खाता है। एवं पानी की बोतल निकालकर पानी भी पीता है। इन सभी क्रियाओं में वो टेक्चुअल साइन लैंग्वेज से निर्देशों को ग्रहण करता है और अपने भावों को व्यक्त करता है। टेलर फ्रेम और ब्रेलर द्वारा गणित, पठन लेखन में भी प्रशिक्षण प्राप्त कर रहा है। सभी बच्चों की तरह उसका भी एक मनपसंद खेल है। उसे सेल फोन को अपने कानों पर लगाकर उसका कंपन महसूस करना अच्छा लगता है। कहा जाता है, वॉकिंग विद अ फ्रेंड इन डार्क इज बेटर देन वॉकिंग अलोन इन लाइट। कहने का तात्पर्य है कि वो लॉन्ग केन ट्रेवल, टैक्टाइल पाथ, ट्रेलिंग और लैंडमार्क्स द्वारा हलन चलन में भी सक्षम है और व्यायाम संबंधी क्रियाएं जैसे ट्रेडमिल, स्टैटिक साइकिल का स्वचालन भी कर सकता है। कहा गया है, द बेस्ट एंड मोस्ट ब्यूटीफुल थिंग्स इन द वर्ल्ड कैन नॉट बी सीन और इवन टच्ड, दे मस्ट बी फेल्ट विद द हार्ट।
कोई मुश्किल हो, दूर मंजिल हो, never stops us from dreaming. हारता है वो, हार माने जो, we are what we believe in. हम धरती को अंबर से मिला दे, हम उड़ सकते हैं, उड़कर दिखा दे, हम छू ले सितारों को। आशा के पंखों पे we can and we will fly, we can and we will fly.
किसी की मुस्कुराहटों पे हो निसार, किसी का दर्द मिल सके तो ले उधार, किसी के वास्ते हो तेरे दिल में प्यार, जीना इसी का नाम है, जीना इसी का नाम है। मान अपनी जेब से फकीर हैं, फिर भी यारो दिल के हम अमीर हैं। मिटे जो प्यार के लिए वो जिंदगी, जले बहार के लिए वो जिंदगी, किसी को हो ना हो हमें तो एतबार, जीना इसी का नाम है, जीना इसी का नाम है।
वेलकम बैक। ब्रेक पे जाने से पहले we have discussed about the employment concessions. Basically, it is for the visually impaired, it is 1% on the identified post, and that too in the government sector. If we talk about the private sector, then government has given certain incentive or a scheme to the private sector that if the visually impaired person is employed there, then the government will pay the remuneration to that person on the part of the private sector for approximately 3 years.
Not remuneration, they pay the EPF share.
What's that, sir?
You see, every employee is supposed to contribute certain percentage of his or her salary in the employee's provident fund,
Okay.
which is which is kind of saving, and the employer is supposed to contribute equal amount of that percentage.
Okay.
Suppose I as an employee contribute 10%, my employer will also pay 10% in my employee's provident fund, so that my saving is augmented by that much percentage. So in order to help the employers in terms of financial comfort levels, if there is a disabled employee, instead of the employer paying his share, suppose a disabled employee is paying 10% of his basic salary or her basic salary in the EPF, and the employer is expected to pay equal amount, just 10%, instead of the employer paying that money, the government will pay that money. So the employer can save up to that much money for 3 years.
I can also add on here that to as an incentive for the employers, there is this national award for the best employee and also for the best employer. So the best employer gets a 1 lakh rupee in cash award with a citation, and this award goes to employers who have at least minimum 5% of their employee force as persons with a disability.
But this could also be the government. This could also be the government.
And you were like telling about this some documentary which you want to show.
No, actually,
yeah,
we have talked about Section 33, but there's not more to employment. But before we do that, I thought I should remember in the earlier part I had mentioned many NGOs supplementing the efforts of the government and working for the visual impairment sector, trying to handle visual impaired persons in various ways. So our viewers may like to know what kind of activities do these NGOs undertake, and we have a short documentary of 5 minutes or so on our organization, All India Confederation of the Blind, which is one of the 3 national organizations, which would indicate to you the kind of activities that NGOs are taking place, major NGOs, which were trying to augment, empower the quality of life of visually impaired persons across the country in various ways. So I will just show you a visual to give you a first-hand experience of these activities.
So can we have a look at the video, please? Sure. So basically, जो आपने बताया ये वीडियो के बारे में, जो NGO intervention है, the role of the NGO intervention, basically it's both in the employment as well as in the education sector.
Employment and self-employment, brain protection, materials, production of materials, production audio materials. There are various projects which NGOs are, advocacy. There are various projects which NGOs undertake.
Inspired by the philosophy of the self-help movement of the blind, the All India Confederation of the Blind, popularly known as AICB, has carved out a niche for itself as a distinctive organization of the blind through its multifaceted, rights-based and service delivery activities. Formed with modest means and lofty goals, AICB today has a countrywide network and grassroots level support of the blind through its 22 affiliates, and is one of the 3 organizations which represent India in the Asian Blind Union and in the World Blind Union. Though there are several schools for the blind in India, the AICB Captain Chandan Lal's Special School for the Blind stands out through its enhanced emphasis on extracurricular and sports activities. As well as through its innovative resource center. And a unique science laboratory. a time when the blind of India faced acute scarcity of Braille textbooks and general reading materials in Braille, the All India Confederation of the Blind brought about a sea change in the scenario by setting up a state-of-the-art computerized Braille press capable of producing more than 40,000 Braille pages per day. Accessibility to print materials is also provided to the blind through a high-tech recording studio. The stenography training program of the organization is highly sought after and has enabled hundreds of blind persons to obtain employment after the training. Computer training provided to scores of visually challenged persons has opened up new vistas in their lives. AICB's Crisis Management Program for those losing their sight at a later age. Through the community-based rehabilitation programs, AICB provides training and employment to the rural blind by teaching them skills such as animal husbandry, cooking, rural crafts, agricultural work, and running daily needs shops. Such interventions have brought about a total turnaround in the lives of the blind living in the villages. As a part of its commitment to work for eye care and prevention of blindness, the AICB runs eye care clinics in both urban and rural areas and conducts thousands of IOL surgeries. The outstanding contributions made by the All India Confederation of the Blind have been recognized both nationally and internationally, as these awards indicate. In the year 2005, the organization celebrated its Silver Jubilee by holding a number of unique events, including the first ever national dance competition for visually impaired children. It was a proud moment for the organization when on 18th November 2005, the Honorable President of India, Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam, inaugurated its National Consultation on Employment of the Visually Impaired. Though it has many milestones to its credit, the All India Confederation of the Blind pledges to forge ahead with even stronger commitment and vitality towards its mission to empower millions of visually challenged persons in India.
So
I
this
must
is,
admit, sir, that really well predicted the role of NGO intervention.
yes, but you see, this is the story of our organization, but I must hasten to add that the other two national organizations, the National Federation of the Blind and the National Action for the Blind, are also doing equally good work in these spheres and many others, and some other major organizations also are supplementing the government effort in this very important way. So when we talk work for the blind, we should not overlook the role of NGOs, because without them the scenario would be very different from what it is as far as the visually impaired persons in this country are concerned. So to go back,
Yeah.
So,
Do you have your trainees like placed on the private sector also?
yes, we do.
Okay, in which
We-
sector probably?
Especially our computer trainers go to call centers, medical transcription, as public relation officers in organizations, in the hospitality, in the travel, and of course in the government sector our placement is very high. One of the reasons in fact our courses are sought after is because our placement rate is very high.
So I would like to add on here, we are running short of time.
Yeah.
So exactly 10 minutes left.
Yeah.
Could you please-
So I'd like to come back to employment. There are 3 or 4 very important issues I want to highlight. Now in employment, another important issue is the identification, the availability of technology. Of course, identification of posts is being done by the Government of India from time to time, the nature identification was done in 2007. Identification means that those posts have been found suitable for a visually impaired person. So the employer cannot deny employment to a visually impaired person on the ground that this post is not suitable for him or her, or the duties of this post cannot be managed by a visually impaired person. This is where the role of identification comes in. As far as technology is concerned, that's a very important aspect of facilities for the visually impaired person as far as employment is concerned. The technological availability aspect is covered in three specific places. In section 32 of the Person with Disabilities Act, in para 51 of the National Policy for Person with Disabilities 50 and 51, and also in the recommendations of the 6th Pay Commission, chapter 4.8. The Act very clearly says that the identification of the post should be done every 3 years, keeping in view the technological advances in mind, but implying thereby that if a latest technology is available, it should be available to a person with disability, in particular to a person with visual impairment in this context. So just not the employment, but appropriate tools to carry out the duties of that employment should also now be available, are also now available to persons with disabilities and to visually impaired persons. In fact, an order of Government of India dated 31st May 2001 makes it very clear that aids and equipments should be provided to visually impaired disabled persons, and of course covering visually impaired persons also. The national policy goes even further. In para 50, around 50, 51, 52, it clearly says, and this national policy incidentally has been passed by the Parliament of India in 2006. This clearly says that the most modern and latest technology should be provided to persons with visual impairments and of course other disabled persons, thereby meaning that even the technology, the computer, software, brain displays, all these should now be available, made available by the government to visually impaired employees. And there has been one case of an IAS, a visually impaired person who has got into IAS and got the Madhya Pradesh cadre. His employer, the Madhya Pradesh Chief Secretary, has provided, the government has provided there the brain embossers and any other technology that he wants for his use. And this has been happening in the universities also, the technology is being provided. Also the 6th Pay Commission recognizes the national policy and Article 32 and argues that the latest technology, the most modern equipment should be provided. And of course the employer can set a limit of cost, and where the cost of the equipment is more than that limit, the cost would have to be shared half-half by the employer and the employee. This is the provision. But this is an important development as far as the employment of the visually impaired persons is concerned. Then there is a concession in income tax. Under 80U, every visually impaired person is entitled to get an exemption. Employee is entitled to get exemption up to 1 lakh rupees over and above other exemptions. That means when your salary is counted for the purpose of income tax, calculated for the purposes of income tax, the 1 lakh rupee would be deducted under section 80U. And normally an average visually impaired employee would save around 15 to 20,000 per year because of this exemption. Also there is a payment of double conveyance allowance. You know, the Government of India pays conveyance allowance to all its employees at certain rate, various rates. But as far as the visually impaired employees are concerned, the conveyance allowance is double of what it goes to a person with sight. And there are some organizations where no conveyance allowance is paid. Even there, some of rupees 200 has to be paid as conveyance allowance to a visually impaired person. So these are some of the, and also no denial of promotion can be there to a visually impaired person on basis of disability. This is also very important, because you may take a person in employment, but they say the next post is not suited to you. And that cannot happen. Promotion will have to be denied. And if a person acquires visual impairment during service, even then promotion cannot be denied. So these are some of the important benefits. Also posting. A visually impaired employee should be posted as near possible as to his or her native place. And request for transfers to the native place should be considered on sympathetic grounds. In the recent Pay Commission, there is also some talk of flexible working hours so that in case you have to go to medical hospitals or do other work, you can choose your working hours, but that has not yet been implemented. Hopefully it shall be done soon. These are some of the concessions which are available in employment and promotion. Kriti, yes.
Ma'am, I would like to ask you, ma'am, what about the concessions in the health sector basically? Are there any concessions or
This
facilities
is the problem.
available?
Health, banking. Though in the banking sector, I know you asked her, but sorry,
Yeah, sir, you
sorry.
can
Yeah, no,
continue.
go ahead.
If she agrees.
See, as far as health is concerned, when it comes to insurance policies, there are very few insurance policies that are available for disabled persons, and as such, it is a little difficult for people with disabilities to get a insurance policy. Mostly they are denied. The second issue is when it comes to the BPL card holders. There is a government insurance scheme that has been floated since the last 2 years, which is again available for all disabled persons. This is for the BPL card holders. Health is a big issue since the UNCRPD has come in force. It also says that no disabled person can be denied any medical intervention or treatment just because they are people with disabilities. This used to happen especially with in the eye hospitals, where if there is a marginal increase in vision that can happen because of a surgery, they used to not be given the treatment, saying it doesn't make any difference. So the UNCRPD now puts in place that no medical treatment or denial of treatment can happen.
And what about, like, I have read in a book regarding postage stamps, like if on the postage also there is also some kind of concession is also
Exactly,
available.
there is if literature for the blind is sent via the Indian Post, and it needs to be written on the envelope.
No,
that
it is
this
not
is
any
literary.
literature for the blind.
This
It's a
is
literature
only-
in braille or audio.
only for braille and audio. These literatures are exempt from postage, and it can go free of cost.
And what about the like fares and the like?
In railways, there is a concession. In up to third AC is 1/4, apart from Shatabdi, Janshatabdi, Rajdhani, and Garib Rath. That means 75% concession both for the visually impaired person and the escort. Second and AC and first AC is 50% concession for the traveller and the escort, the visually impaired person as well as for the escort. And in the air also there is a 50% concession for the visually impaired passenger, but that is not very applicable now because many of the Apex fare, well, it's there on paper, but not very much used because the Apex fare are normally less than 50% of the system fare. It's very important to see the concession is on the system fare, not on the Apex fare. So that important. Housing is an important area where concessions are available. Allotment of housing is under section 43 of the Act, preferential allotment of housing and land. Many states have formulated policies regarding this. In Delhi, the DDA gives 1% reservation in housing. In UP, in fact, there's a 20% discount in the cost of housing allotted by the UP government to visually impaired person. Also, the stamp duty on registry up to 10 lakhs is waived. So many states have their own scheme of giving preferential allotments, reservations and concession as well as housing is concerned. So that's also an important area. In the banking, a very important circular has come recently facilitating the use of ATMs and checkbooks by visually impaired person. The RBI circular clearly states that checkbook facilities and ATM cards and lockers cannot be denied to visually impaired person, which was the case till recently because banks were creating a lot of problem. This is the most recent order on the banking sector. So these are some of the concessions. There are some more, but of course the time may not permit to enumerate more. Yes.
So that's all for the today's session, and today we discussed about the facilities and concessions which are available for the visually impaired person in order to promote their self-sufficiency, to promote their dignity and to promote their performances and to have a more active participation to the society. We discussed about the facilities and concessions related to the education, the employment, the travel facilities in the health sector, then in the banking, then the postage stamps, then in the housing facilities. So we discussed the facilities and concessions today, but this is the end of the session. But before that, I would like to thank both of you for coming over here and having
Thank you very much.
discussion with
Thank
us.
you.
Thank you so much,
Thank
and thank
you.
you viewers for maintaining with us. Thank you so much.
Thanks for inviting us.
Thank you, sir.
Best of luck to our viewers. Thank you.
Thank you.